June 23, 1942. The skies above the English Channel churned with drifting clouds and the fading echo of battle. Royal Air Force spotters at Pembury Airfield, South Wales, raised their binoculars to track what looked like a German fighter slicing through the mist. It wasn't diving in attack. It was descending, gracefully, wheels down, flaps extended. Something was wrong. Sirens stayed silent. The sleek shape touched down on the RAF runway and rolled to a stop. The engine coughed once and died. Then the canopy slid open. Out stepped Oberleutnant Armin Faber of Jägerschwader II, still gripping his flight gloves. Only now, he stood surrounded by blue uniforms, not gray. The aircraft beside him were Spitfires, not Messerschmitts. His stomach turned cold. In seconds, he realized the unthinkable. He had landed in enemy territory and just handed Britain Germany's most secret weapon. For 8 months, Allied pilots had been haunted by this very machine, the Focke-Wulf 190, codenamed Butcher Bird. It appeared over France in late 1941 and changed everything. RAF ace James Johnny Johnson recalled the first encounter. It outrolled us, outdived us, and tore through our Spitfires as if we were standing still. Every squadron across southern England repeated the same warning. Do not turn with it. Do not dive after it. And pray you never meet one alone. Faber's accidental landing changed that overnight. Britain had captured an intact FW-190, the very aircraft that had outclassed every Spitfire over the Channel. For the first time, Allied engineers could see, touch, and test the weapon that had been dominating them. Faber wasn't inexperienced, just disoriented. In the chaos of combat, after chasing RAF fighters across the Channel, cloud and glare tricked his bearings. Thinking he was over France, he mistook Wales for home soil. Combat fatigue, high-speed turns, and the sun's reflection sealed his fate. By the time he realized his error, it was too late to take off again. RAF ground crews had already surrounded him. The aircraft was quickly seized, examined, and reported to RAF Fighter Command. What they found inside would soon rewrite Allied air strategy. What British engineers discovered inside that captured machine would expose the technological secrets of the Luftwaffe and change how every Allied pilot fought from that day on. Next, inside the Butcher Bird, how Britain dissected Germany's deadliest fighter. Within 48 hours of Faber's arrest, the captured fighter was loaded onto a flatbed truck and escorted under armed guard to the Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough. The mood inside RAF intelligence was electric. Engineers and pilots gathered to see what the enemy had been hiding. The moment the hangar doors opened, Britain saw its first intact Focke-Wulf 190-3. The Spitfire had always been celebrated for grace and elegance. This machine was something else entirely: brutal, compact, purposeful. Every rivet seemed designed for war efficiency. British test pilot Captain Eric Winkle Brown, the man who would later fly more captured aircraft than any pilot alive, remembered the moment vividly. It looked like a predator crouched on its haunches, short, muscular, ready to spring. Over the next weeks, engineers took the fighter apart bolt by bolt. Beneath its armor, they found a BMW 801 radial engine producing nearly 1,700 horsepower, far more than they expected from a compact airframe. Its cowling design channeled airflow in a way that gave the FW-190 an edge in acceleration and low-altitude climb. But the true revelation was in its controls. Allied fighters required muscle to roll or bank. The Focke-Wulf, by contrast, seemed to move by instinct. Its aileron system gave it unmatched roll rate. The pilot could flip from one side to the other before an opponent even reacted. "You don't fly it," one engineer joked. "You think it." And its weapons, 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns, delivered an eruption of firepower so concentrated that a single burst could disintegrate a Spitfire in seconds. Yet the tests also uncovered hidden flaws. The same engine that gave it power struggled above 20,000 feet. Cooling systems choked in the thin air, and the aircraft's once fluid control stiffened at high speed. Brown's report concluded, "Below 20,000, it is a tiger. Above 25, a tired lion gasping for breath." That single line would reshape Allied air combat doctrine. fighter command realized that if the 190 was forced high, its advantages melted away. Altitude, not aggression, would be the Allies' new weapon. The British had cracked the code. But they weren't alone. Across the Atlantic, American test pilots were about to fly the captured German fighter for themselves. And what they learned would transform the air war forever. Next, the Americans take flight. How U.S. pilots turned German secrets into survival. By August 1942, word of the captured German fighter had reached Washington. The U.S. Army Air Forces were desperate to know how the Luftwaffe's new Predator fought, and more importantly, how to beat it. At Farnborough, British officers quietly opened their hangars to a small group of American test pilots. Among them was Major Cass Hoff, an analytical mind disguised behind a fighter pilot's grin. When he first saw the Focke-Wulf 190 under the hangar lights, his first words were simple: "So this is the beast." The Americans climbed into the cockpit one by one, strapping in as engineers recorded every reaction. Hoff's test flight would soon produce one of the most influential intelligence documents of the entire air war. When Hoff took the FW-190 airborne, he immediately felt its responsiveness. The controls were light, precise, and eerily alive beneath his hands. But as he climbed beyond 20,000 feet, the aircraft began to strain. Its roar turning hollow, its climb sluggish. After landing, he filed a report that would be circulated to every fighter group deploying to Europe. The FW-190 will dominate any Allied fighter below 20,000 feet. Above 25, we hold the advantage. Force them up, and they break. Those 23 words became tactical doctrine. From that point on, altitude was survival. American squadrons training with P-47 Thunderbolts and early P-51 Mustangs were drilled to never accept combat on the FW-190's terms. Let the Germans dive, but own the sky above. The report moved fast, across desks, across oceans, into briefing tents in England. Fighter groups practiced the new strategy: high-altitude interception, energy retention, coordinated vertical attacks. By early 1943, U.S. bomber escorts flying at 25,000 feet and higher could finally engage the Luftwaffe on equal terms. Pilots who had once feared the German fighter now carried its weaknesses folded in their flight jackets. Climb first, fight second, became the mantra. Every engagement became a lesson drawn from that one misplaced landing in Wales. The Americans had learned how to survive. But what came next went beyond tactics. The captured fighter would change how the Allies built their own machines. Next, engineering the edge. How a German fighter shaped the P-47 and P-51. Back at Wright Field, Ohio, engineers gathered around a newly arrived technical dossier stamped confidential. Focke-Wulf 190, captured specimen. The data gathered at Farnborough had crossed the Atlantic, packed with every measurement, test curve, and control feedback. The Americans weren't just reading it, they were redesigning their own aircraft around it. The P-47 Thunderbolt, already the heaviest single-engine fighter ever built, suddenly had a new competitor to study. The captured German fighter taught them something crucial. Agility was as vital as horsepower. Soon, Thunderbolt engineers began experimenting with new aileron ratios and control balance tabs, inspired by the Focke-Wulf's responsiveness. Across the Atlantic, British designers followed suit. The lessons weren't theoretical anymore. They were being welded into aluminum and steel. The FW-190's weapon layout fascinated Allied analysts. Its cannons were mounted close to the fuselage, delivering a dense, tight pattern of fire. American designers realized that their widespread wing mounts on older P-40s and early P-47s diluted impact accuracy. Soon, U.S. and British engineers began concentrating armament near the centerline, a configuration that would later define the P-51 Mustang's killing precision. Even the cockpit ergonomics of the German design impressed them. Controls clustered by instinctive reach, canopy framing built for wide visibility. Allied test pilots noted that Faber's captured fighter felt designed by a man who expected to fight for his life every day. That philosophy soon informed Allied cockpits, where visibility and simplicity became survival tools. But perhaps the greatest transformation wasn't mechanical, it was mental. Before Faber's landing, Allied pilots whispered about the 190 like a phantom. It was faster, deadlier, unstoppable. But after engineers pulled it apart and found its flaws, the fear began to fade. Pilots now knew exactly where it failed: heavy controls above 400 miles per hour, overheating engines above 20,000 feet, sluggish turns in sustained combat. Knowledge replaced superstition. The Luftwaffe's butcher bird lost its mystery, and in war, losing mystery means losing power. The Allies had learned, adapted, and evolved, but they weren't finished yet. As 1943 unfolded, those lessons would be tested in the skies over Europe, where Thunderbolts and Mustangs faced the butcher bird head-on. Next, the turning skies: how knowledge broke the Luftwaffe's grip. By the spring of 1943, the air war over Europe had changed. American P-47 Thunderbolts now soared above 25,000 feet, escorting bomber streams that stretched for miles across the cold sky. German radar screens flickered with familiar shapes. Yet when the Focke-Wulf 190s climbed to intercept, their advantage evaporated. Their engines wheezed in thin air, controls stiffened, and once fearless pilots found themselves struggling to match the altitude and agility of the Allied fighters above. For the first time, Luftwaffe commanders saw kill ratios shifting against them. The Allies had turned the German fighters' secrets into strategy, and Faber's mistake had become their invisible ally. RAF pilots flying the new Spitfire Mk9 discovered they could finally meet the FW-190 on equal terms. Its upgraded Merlin 61 engine thrived where the German radial faltered. Meanwhile, American P-51 Mustangs, lighter and longer-legged, exploited the very data the Farnborough engineers had extracted: roll rates, dive profiles, control stiffness thresholds. The Allies now fought by rule: force the 190 high, then strike as it struggled to recover from dives or energy-bleeding turns. Even Luftwaffe ace Joseph Pips Priller noticed the shift, writing in his diary, "The Americans have learned. They no longer follow our role. They climb, they wait. They know our weakness." Combat that once felt like domination turned into a duel of equals, and soon into defeat. The captured fighter remained at Farnborough until the war's end, a living textbook of German engineering. Every new variant the Luftwaffe introduced was compared against that original machine from Wales. Engineers could predict improvements, counter designs, and brief pilots accordingly. When the war ended, British test pilot Eric Brown summarized the irony best. "Faber's navigation error gave us the Rosetta Stone of Luftwaffe design. That one misjudged landing not only reshaped aerial tactics, it saved countless Allied lives." Faber himself spent the rest of the war in a Canadian POW camp, returning home years later a quiet man who rarely spoke of the day that changed the skies over Europe. The Focke-Wulf 190 was one of the finest fighters of its age: powerful, efficient, lethal. But its legacy proves a deeper truth: superior technology wins battles, superior intelligence wins wars. One disoriented pilot, one flawless aircraft, and one unexpected landing handed the Allies the knowledge they needed to turn fear into mastery. In the vast machinery of war, victory sometimes comes not from conquest, but from understanding. History is full of small mistakes that changed the fate of nations. One misplaced landing revealed the secrets of the Luftwaffe. In our next story, another accident, another revelation, when a failed mission gave the Allies the key to breaking the Pacific Code.